you. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Angela Davis. We are gathered to commemorate together the 60th anniversary of the execution of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. We are here to honor their resistance, part of a long and continuing tradition of social justice activism. And we are here to tell the story of the organization that grew from their defiance, the Rosenberg Fund for Children, and to celebrate the families and youth who continue today to fight for social justice locally and globally. To help us tell this story, we brought together performers from your communities and from around the country. Our guests this evening include Eve Ensler and Cotter Smith. The stories you will see unfold are true, based on real events, although some names cannot be shared. The words you will hear are excerpted from letters and other writing. 60 years ago tonight, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were on death row. I want to tell you a little bit about what came before. During the Depression of the 1930s, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were Jewish teenagers living on the Lower East Side. They were desperately poor. Ethel stuffed newspaper into her shoes to block the holes, to keep her feet from freezing as she walked to high school. Julius's mother hard-boiled one egg to divide between him and his siblings. Like many other people, Ethel and Julius watched the world crumbling around them. They saw the meager possessions of impoverished families in their neighborhood thrown into the street because they couldn't pay the rent. They watched volunteers protesting the evictions, breaking into the empty apartments and moving the families back in, the Stop Foreclosures activists of their day. In response, Ethel and Julius joined the Communist Party. They collected funds for the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. They organized for the rights of workers and the poor and against fascism in Europe. Years later, in 1950, living in Knickerbocker Village with their two young sons, Julius and Ethel were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit espionage. After a short trial held during the most intense period of Senator McCarthy's Red Scare and conducted with significant prosecutorial and judicial misconduct, they were convicted and sentenced to death. The Federal Bureau of Prisons scheduled the executions for June 18, 1953, Ethel and Julius's 14th wedding anniversary. On June 15th, the U.S. Supreme Court denied a request for a stay of execution for Ethel and Julius by a 5-4 vote. Travel back in time with me 60 years to that shameful period, another shameful period in our history as a nation. It is June 16th, 1953. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg are on death row at Sing Sing prison.
I am Michael. I will never forget June 1953. It is seared into my memory. I can travel right back there in my mind. I'm 10 years old. My brother Robbie's just turned 6. In the 3 years since our parents' arrest, Robbie and I have lived in 4 places, with both grandmothers, in a children's shelter in the Bronx, and now, this past year, we've been living with Ben and Sonia Bach, friends of our parents, in Toms River, New Jersey.
Early this morning, Ethel and Julius's attorney, Manny Block, drives the boys to Sing Sing prison. This is their last visit with their parents. It is also the only one in 3 long years when the boys are allowed to see both their parents at the same time. The whole family is together.
I am Robbie. I recall less than Michael, but I do remember Sing Sing Prison. It is a fortress surrounded by high gray walls. It scares me. I hurry to get inside, away from the reporters and photographers. We walk down grim hallways without windows into a bright, airy room. My mother looks shorter than I remember. I sit on my father's lap. I do not fully understand what is happening to my parents. All these years later, I cannot remember exactly how we spent those last hours as a family, but I do remember feeling comforted rather than scared.
Mommy and Daddy sit at opposite ends of the table. Robbie and I wander around the room hugging them and listening while they talk strategy with Manny. I take heart when Manny says, "Douglas won't grant the stay, but I'm sure Eisenhower will grant clemency." Robbie does not understand that the executions are scheduled for Thursday, that we will probably never see our parents again, but I do. At the end of the visit, I can't hold it in any longer and start to wail that our parents have only one full day left to live.
As soon as the boys leave, Ethel writes a letter to Michael and Robbie. She asks Manny Block to deliver the letter as quickly as possible.
My dearest darlings, this is the process known as sweating it out, and it's tough, for sure. Maybe you thought I didn't feel like crying too when we were hugging and kissing goodbye. Darlings, that would have been so easy, far too easy, and I had to resist a very real temptation to follow your lead and break down with you. So I took the hard way, because I love you more than myself, and because I knew you needed that love far more than I needed the relief of crying.
I know, sweethearts, an explanation of this kind cannot ever substitute for what we have been missing and for what we hope to be able to return to. We need to try to remain calm and free from panic so that we can do all we can to help one another to see this thing through.
All my love and all my kisses, Mommy.
Like Robbie, children may not fully understand what is happening to their parents, to their families, but they are often profoundly affected by the experience. In 1990, Robbie started the RFC to offer support to today's children of targeted progressive activists, kids with experiences like his and Michael's. Later, the RFC expanded to also help young people facing repression for their own activism. RFC beneficiaries come from many political movements, from the struggles to preserve civil liberties, wage peace, save the environment from corporate greed, combat racism and homophobia, from efforts to organize workers, prisoners, immigrants, and others whose human rights are threatened. These activist families are today's Rosenbergs. They struggle to balance their love for their children and grandchildren with their commitment to political change. One of these activists is Russell Maroon Schultz, incarcerated since 1972.
I am a new African political prisoner of war. I was a founding member of the Black Unity Council in Philadelphia, which merged with the Black Panther Party in 1969. In August of 1970, at the height of the nationwide repression of the new African liberation movement, I became a fugitive after a Philadelphia policeman was wounded in a retaliatory attack in response to the unjustified killing of a youth. I was convicted for the attack on the police station and sentenced to life imprisonment, life plus imprisonment. In prison, I had the good fortune to listen to the legacy tapes created by the Journal of African Civilizations. These tapes are dedicated to a revision of the role of the African in the world's greatest civilizations and to the contribution of Africa to the achievement of man in the arts and sciences. It emphasizes what blacks have been given to the world, not what they have lost. I want to make this knowledge available to my grandchildren, so I'm asking for a grant to buy sets of these tapes for their use. I will take on the responsibility of coaching these children through digesting the material on the tapes.
I am Russell's son, and I carry his name. My dad used those tapes to teach and connect with his grandchildren through letters, phone calls, and prison visits. My daughter loves the tapes, and my father is in awe of my little girl. He kicks us all out of the visiting room so that he and his little prodigy can talk ideologies, politics, and of course fashion and things like that. Those tapes went a long way and bridged a lot of gaps.
I am Russell's daughter. My father has been in the Pennsylvania prison system for 40 years. I feel like I grew up in prison. I remember being 8 years old and visiting him there. I thought he lived well. The prison lawn was manicured and the shiny floors were waxed. One year for Christmas, I sent my father a silver 50-cent piece that had been given to me. I was too young to know about money orders. I waited for Daddy's call. I knew he would be so excited about my present. He never got it. "Baby, don't send me money," Daddy said later. "The guards probably got it." I was devastated. The next visit, I kicked the first guard I saw. I was forced to sit in the yard and not allowed to visit Daddy. My family was upset with me and didn't understand why I did it. That was the day I knew Daddy wasn't in a nice place.
Over the years, the children in our family have received RFC grants for the Legacies tapes, for prison visits, and for activities like tutoring and community theater. I'm older now, and my father's almost 70. I'm worried about him. He's been in prison 40 years, solitary confinement for 30. Mentally, I'm right there with him in that cell, eating the horrible food, sleeping on the cot, taking cold showers, sitting on the hard metal stool, writing to the outside world seeking support to end the daily torture of solitary confinement.
For families like the Schotzes and the Rosenbergs, prison visits can be critical, a short oasis of normalcy in a frightening world. These visits can be very expensive since prisoners are often punitively incarcerated far from their home communities. In the early years, RFC struggled to raise enough money to pay for prison visits. In 2001, 2 members of the legal team that won financial compensation for the victims of the mass killing of inmates at Attica State Prison in 1971 made generous donations in honor of those prison activists who fought and died to endow the Attica Prison Visit Program. So far, this program has funded more than 200 visits, reuniting over 100 children with their parents or grandparents in prison. Each of these families has a unique story. Picture this: a prison visiting booth where visitors are separated from prisoners by a glass barrier. On the visitor's side of the barrier, 2 teenage girls await the arrival of their father. He enters handcuffed, escorted by a guard.
10 minutes.
Happy Father's Day, Papa. I was just looking at this great picture I have of you with a huge smile and a bandana on your head. Remember I told you about my marathon? Everybody wears bandanas. Do you think I could have one of yours? One that you wear a lot? That way I can have a piece of you with me.
Papa, I
I got to talk to you about something you and I have never really talked about, stuff that happened when I was little. You see, I think it was a big mistake when you and Mama decided to bring children into the situation you were in. I'm glad I was born, but I am not glad that I was exposed to things that were your business and probably should have stayed that way. I'm sorry, Papa, I know this is not the Father's Day you were expecting.
Why did we even have children? Even after we went underground? And me a most wanted fugitive? Why does a person living in the ghettos or the barrios have children? Why does a person living in a dope-infested neighborhood have children? Or the immigrant workers sweating in the fields and the factories for less than minimum wage? It's because we love children and want a family. Even on the brink of disaster and a truncated future, it can't just be the folks with money and property having kids. Children are the seeds of hope.
It still gives me nightmares. We were right in the middle of it, as if the police planned it that way. At first it was like a mob, all these men with guns. From the car window I saw them knock you down and start punching and kicking you. When it cleared enough for me to see again, your arms and legs were tied. They moved us from one car to another. They had Mama handcuffed against a police car. From the car window as we moved away, I shouted to her, "Mama, I'll take care of my sisters."
I know you did, sweetheart. She told me about that. You did what you had to do, what you were raised to do. A father couldn't be prouder.
We'd never been separated from you before. They took me into a room all by myself. I was 9 years old. These men were big and they were strange. They told me I had to answer their questions. Where were the others? Where did they live? They told me I should answer them quick or bad things could happen to them. My stomach hurt from trying to keep it all in. They even offered me money to tell.
Don't lean on the glass! Time's up.
Piece of my heart tore loose.
After this visit, the father sent this letter to the RFC.
Dear Robbie, a couple of weeks ago, my girls, the sunshine of my life, were here. I couldn't have felt more alive if I had kissed the sky, or more loved. This was our longest separation, but they assured me that the circle remained unbroken. The girls adjusted quickly to the conditions. At one point, they held up the telephone receiver like a microphone and sang for me.
Good night, sweetheart, well, it's time to go. Do-do-do-do.
Good night, sweetheart, well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, good night, sweetheart, good night.
I'll remember that moment the rest of my life.
That visit was on Father's Day. And today, on this Father's Day, we celebrate the power of bonds between family members, all kinds of families, and all kinds of intimate and emotional connections that nurture and strengthen us as human beings. We celebrate families who, despite targeting and harassment, despite imprisonment and persecution, despite poverty and racism, despite homophobia and ethnic or religious hatred, continue to pass progressive activist values from generation to generation, from parents to their daughters and their sons.
They wouldn't hear your music and they pulled your paintings down. They wouldn't read your writing and they banned you from the town. But they couldn't stop you dreaming and the victory you've won. For you sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. Your weary smile, it proudly hides the chain marks on your hands, where you bravely strive to realize the rights of every man. And though your body's bent and low, a victory you've won. For you sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. I don't know your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone can work and children they can play. And though you never got your share of the fruits that you have won, you sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. They taunted you in Belfast and they tortured you in Spain. And in that Warsaw ghetto where they tied you up in chains. In Vietnam and Chile when they came with tanks and guns. It's there you sow the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. It's there you sow the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. And now your music's playing and the writing's on the wall. And all the dreams you painted can be seen by one and all. And now you've got them thinking, and the future's just begun. For you sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.
Today is June 17, 1953. While the Rosenberg family was meeting at Sing Sing yesterday, two attorneys who had not previously worked on the defense, Vike Pharma and Daniel Marshall, presented a new petition to Supreme Court Justice Douglas as he prepared to leave for vacation. They claimed that the Rosenbergs had been tried under the wrong law and that under the correct law, the death sentence was illegal. Douglas postponed his vacation and decided that the petition must be considered by the district court, possibly adding months or years to Ethel and Julius's lives.
It's Wednesday, June 17th. Robbie and I are at the home of our family friends, the Bachs, playing our usual game of Monopoly. Sonia and her daughter are in the kitchen. All of a sudden, I hear an incredible commotion, yelling and screaming, but they sound happy. They burst into our room and start hugging us. "The Douglas stay! The Douglas stay!" they shout. I can't believe it. Our parents' lawyer, Manny, had been so sure he wouldn't grant it. As the news sinks in, we become wildly happy. This is without a doubt the best news we've had since our parents' arrest.
What Michael and Robbie don't know is that according to FBI files that will be forced into the open 20 years later by their Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, late last night the Attorney General of the United States met secretly with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. They agreed that if Douglas issued a stay, the entire court would be called into special session to vacate Douglas's action. They conspired to do this knowing neither the legal reasoning behind the request for the stay nor the contents of Douglas's ruling, which had not yet been written. Douglas's stay only survives about 8 hours. By the late afternoon, the Attorney General asked that the Supreme Court be called into special session, and the Chief Justice schedules a hearing for tomorrow morning, June 18th. In a petition for executive clemency to President Dwight Eisenhower, Ethel and Julius write,
We, Julius Rosenberg and Ethel Rosenberg, husband and wife, are now confined in the death house in Sing Sing prison, awaiting electrocution on June 18, our 14th wedding anniversary. We address this petition to you for the exercise of your supreme power to prevent our unjust deaths.
The guilt in this case, if we die, will be America's. The shame, if we die, will dishonor the generation and pervade history until future Americans recapture the heritage of truth, justice, and equality before the law. Our case has made new precedents in the law of the land, evil precedents, unjust, inhuman, and with not even the concern for human life shown the rights of property.
You will not hear our voices. Hear the voices of the world. Hear the Pope. Hear his cardinal in France. Listen to the pleas of 5,000 Protestant ministers and the rabbis of France. Hear the great and the humble, from Einstein to the dock workers at Liège, from cotton spinners of India to the transport workers of England to the auto workers of Detroit. Read the petitions from London, Melbourne, Buenos Aires, Ottawa, and Rome. They ask you not to orphan our two young boys.
We ask you, Mr. President, the civilized head of a civilized nation, to judge our plea with reason and humanity. And remember, we are a father and a mother.
President Eisenhower was unresponsive to these pleas from people and organizations. 60 years later, the federal government continues to respond to dissent of all kinds with a deaf ear and a heavy hand. They still target movements for social change, the 99%, with knee-jerk fear and without regard for collateral damage to innocent people. Fast forward with me to the morning of September 24th, 2010, to the home of two women, longtime anti-war and international solidarity activists, and their young son.
Did you finish your breakfast?
Yep.
Okay, don't forget your lunch.
Can I watch TV till the bus comes?
Bus comes in 10 minutes.
Who's that, Ma?
Open up, FBI!
We have a warrant. Open the door or we'll break it down.
A warrant? What's going on?
We have a warrant to search your house, remove evidence, and question you.
I'd like to call an attorney.
Later. Sit down.
We've secured the trash. By the way, there's a couple dozen people in the front lawn.
Those are our friends.
I've got some questions I want to ask you. How many people attend your meetings?
How do people find out about your demonstrations? Well, speak up.
I've just come from Sophie's. Her house is being raided too.
They have a warrant.
For our trash?
Yes. Not that we need a warrant. We have the right to search computers, remove household trash, and use surveillance on any person who attracts our attention.
Who takes the minutes at your meetings?
Answer the question. You want to be in more trouble?
Remember, people like you have no spousal privileges.
When did you join the socialist organization? How do you recruit new members?
What groups did you meet with in Palestine? Who did you conference with on your last trip?
Don't want to talk? Maybe this will change your mind.
You're both subpoenaed to a grand jury.
That day, September 24th, 2010, over 70 FBI agents simultaneously raid 8 homes in Chicago, Minneapolis, and Grand Rapids. They subpoena 14 people, all involved in international solidarity and anti-war activism, particularly in support of groups fighting US-backed repressive governments. The FBI agents ransack homes. They confiscate cell phones and computers, address books and passports, family photos and children's artwork. In the coming weeks, activists in other cities are targeted and harassed. All 23 subpoenaed activists refuse to appear before the grand jury.
They went into my room and looked through my stuff. They took my iPod. They took so many pictures. Why did they come to our house? We did not do anything wrong.
A woman in our group, a friend of ours, secretly recorded thousands of hours of peace group meetings and anti-war demonstrations.
They were in our house for 5 hours. They had submachine guns, automatic rifles, extra magazines, hundreds of bullets. They took our books and flyers, our papers and files, even baggage tags, evidence of places we traveled. They took our trash.
Listen, this is serious. You face charges of material support for foreign terrorist organizations.
Carrying penalties of up to 65 years in prison.
The Constitution gives us the right to express our beliefs.
Not necessarily.
The courts have ruled that in certain instances, free speech constitutes material support for foreign terrorist organizations.
In what kinds of instances?
We know it when we see it.
Well, we know it when we see it too, don't we? We know what targeting looks like. We know what it looks like when a government tries to divide its people and set them against each other. We know what it looks like when a worried administration creates an atmosphere of distrust and fear. We're going to wrap up the first half of the program with a group of activists and musicians who are on our side, the side of the people. This trio is made up of DJ Illinois and brothers Rodstars and G1, whose parents were leftist activists in Chile. They were arrested, incarcerated in concentration camps, and tortured by the Pinochet regime after the September 11, 1973 coup. These young people are second-generation activists fighting for social justice. Their lyrics explore the socio-political situation in Latin America, the immigration debate, police brutality in this country, among other issues. The arts collective they've established in the South Bronx uses music to organize and educate around social justice. Please welcome Rebel Diaz.
One hand in the air like this, one hand in the air, and we're gonna turn it into a fist. When the beat drops, I need y'all to rock with us like this. Come on. Okay, come on. Need y'all help from the left to the right, from the front to the back. All my people united as one. It's gonna go like this. Come on. Let me hear y'all say, stop the war. Stop the war. Say, let's get free. Let's get free. Come on, stop the war. Stop the war. Say, let's get free. Let's get free. Adelante del combate, más con el elefante. No steps back, you want me, say lo que hace. Beat our body, ideas into action. Move past the planet, it's time to save the planet. Where you standing? Which way is you going? Which side is you supporting? They build walls, we show love. They honor the dollar, I'm like peace to the gods. Toast to the spirits, live life so I feel it. Not stuck up in prison, on the move like in Philly. March on the city, my people walk with me. Hands in the air, this life is worth living. Motivate, come on, what's your motivation? Motivate, move, come on, what's your motivation? Motivate, move, what's your motivation? Motivate, come on, what's your motivation? I'm inspired by a letter I got from Lynn Stewart.
just read it twice, so I know that I'm sure. Know it in my heart that the system is abusive. I also know a movement is more than music. If you can't organize 5 people on your block, you should reassess before you bust a break or shots. I know it's nice to roll a Dutch and not do much, but conditions getting worse, so I feel we in a rush. You know karate, come on. You know how to farm. You wake up with the sun or with an alarm. If your leadership's lethargic and your gang's a moving target, all you gonna do is catch the stupid old charges. Yet if the leadership is militant and ready, prepare for Armageddon for the rich and the greedy. Let's see the proletariat at the front of the line. If you ignore about society, come on, motivate tonight, motivate, move. What's your motivation? Motivate, come on. What's your motivation? Motivate, yeah. What's your motivation? Motivate, yo. We gon' need your help. Hey, yo, we say people, y'all say power. People. We say we want, y'all say freedom. We want. Yeah. We believe the line was drawn a long time ago. We are on the side of the people. See, I gotta draw the line, I can't take it no more. If you ain't down with revolution, what you waiting for? Making money for suckers and our communities poor. Ripping flags off of coffins, man, this ain't our war. Colonized and terrorized by the world's biggest killers. The US government, the biggest weapon and drug dealers. Filling prisons with children, incarcerating the future. MySpace and Facebook got us stuck on computers. Stuck on stupid pumping music that's abusive to the shorties. The nonsense that they speaking, we just listen and absorb it. I'm doing, I'm awoken, I'm a giant and ready. But that I'm boy, Oaxaca, and we holding machetes. I'm rock-holic, Palestinian, shooting, holding slingshots. With every single kid that's down for hip-hop. The culture, the life, what it really stands for. This music is resistance, it's the voice of the poor. On the side of the workers, the teachers, and lunch ladies. On the streets of brown mommies, raising out brown babies. I'm with youth organized, cleaning up the Bronx River. Caio Escalante when I stand and deliver. I'm with Evo Morales, man, he running Bolivia. Distribution of the land so we can all live bigger. I'm with Hugo and Fidel, Grandmaster and Melly Bell. With the Panthers up in green, justice for Sean Bale. With Camacho Negron, with Ojeda Rios. Freedom for Oscar Lopez, time to get an appeal. With a Blue Jamal, with a Sada Shakur. With the compas en el Ocan y getting a penny more. Which side are you on? Con Victor Toro. Which side are you on? The RFC. Which side are you on? Angela Davis. Which side are you on? With Nito Kayak. Which side are you on? With Russell Show. Which side are you on? With Lynn Stewart. Come on, which side are you on? With the people. Which side? Now I'm for telling the truth, exposing the lies. Think about them dead soldiers when you're driving your ride. The people die for the oil and Daddy Bush's revenge. I'm with the widows, the children, and the lonely best friends. For families staying together as one. I'm not for the raids or the deportations. I'm with Victor Toro and the MIR. So watch out for them stitches in that unmarked car. And for Lil Salito, we gon' fight for your moms. So we gon' shout her out twice in one song. I'm for 12 million workers and Vida Ariano. For a world without borders and a better tomorrow. Better tomorrow.
Since 2002, there's been approximately 4 million stop and frisks in New York City. In 2011, there was almost 700,000, of which 80% of those people stopped and frisked are young Black and Latino males between the ages of 14 and 24. In our borough, the South Bronx, sadly, the after-school activity for our young people, instead of art classes, instead of, music, has become being stopped and frisked. We try to provide a direct alternative to that by having the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective, which is a liberated autonomous space where we try to provide hip-hop culture. And we want to shout out the Rosenberg Foundation for showing love to us as a youth activist group that has been under attack.
I also want to invite my brother Vidum and my brother Lust from the RDAC BX to join us for this next song. And VI, I gotta shout it out. We want to dedicate this next song, and hopefully all of y'all can join us in the struggle so we can demand justice for Marley Graham, a young 18-year-old. Yeah, make some noise for that.
A young 18-year-old who was murdered inside of his own house, and for which the police officer, Richard Haste, who murdered him, recently had his case dismissed. Because we all know that the DAs are all in cahoots with the NYPD anyways. So this next song is called Stop, Stop and Frisk.
Shit. Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud, yeah. Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud. Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Yo, fuck the police, yeah, I said it.
Fuck off.
Let them come in, let it David style.
Bust off.
Eye for an eye keeps everyone blind, but I'm tired of losing mine.
Another child dies.
Another child beat by the cop who walks the beat for arrest so he can meet. It's quarter for the week these days. Can't walk the streets without the jakes, trying to run up and search you for your pockets and murk you.
That's criminal.
The system accused you of the same crimes they do to you and call it excusable. Sean Bill's killers acquitted. Troy Davis lynched and Mumia still in prison. I don't get it. The land of the free, why you think young Tory guns carry guns? We've been taught violence since day one. So if they want peace in the streets, we can start with justice for your teeth and the family of the fallen.
Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk.
Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk.
Yo, murder is murder and it's also stop. Time to shut the city down, bring business to a halt. Illegal searches, they ain't never had a warrant. The streets is on fire, don't consider this a warning. It's a promise from the land full of promise. When the DA give us office after officers assault us. 13 years after Amadou, they still killing us, what you gon' do? Where you gonna run to when they run in your house? And they pull their guns out, one shot take you out. The biggest gang is the NYPD, and Mayor Bloomberg is they dirty ass G. They stop and frisk to the jail with kids. Let's keep it 100, man, I'm tired of this. They guilty of murder, guilty of assault. Get a special prosecutor, man, prosecute them all. Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk.
Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk.
I see the kid get beat, riding kick staff. Kick them where hate you call them a thief cause his skin's brown. Are we less human? We niggas is mixed now. Has the mayor been stopped the frisk down in his town? They beat you there and lock you up in the crease bell. Many stories about abuse, power the streets now. Bullets rain hell on black males in 2012. It's target practice, prepare for another Sean Bell. Ray Kelly be calling up the offices and tell them officers
Search niggas to bring quarters in.
8 times I've been stopped for no reason. An unarmed kid was murdered.
Burn all the precincts.
The badges worth more than the life of a human being. No justice and just us fighting for fucking freedom. Instead we're asked for IDs, giving severe beatings. I pray for the better, but the police kill Jesus. Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Come on.
Oh, mama, how me fear for my life from the loud.
Say stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. Stop, stop and frisk. And we gon' stop.
Stop and frisk.
And we won't stop.
Till we get justice.
Yeah, and we gon' stop.
Stop and frisk.
Yeah, and we won't stop.
Till we get justice.
When I say stop, y'all say stop and frisk.
Stop, stop and frisk.
Stop,
stop and frisk.
When I say stop, y'all say stop and frisk.
Stop, stop and frisk.
Stop,
stop and frisk. Police.
Say whoop, whoop.
Fuck the police.
Come on, whoop, whoop.
Fuck the police.
Come on, whoop, whoop. DJ Illinois on the ones and twos, y'all. Make some noise for Rhythm, y'all. These two young men to our left and right came in as students in our community center. Now we're proud to say that they are the teachers and facilitate the workshops for other youth. What we are talking about is each one, teach one.
Hey, and I also want to share, because I always think about my mother when we swear in music. But I want to really show love because that song was a song that was a lot of rage channeled. And I want to shout out the folks here at the RFC, because when we told them, yo, you guys sure you want us to do that song? And they said, go on ahead, because that song, you have to swear sometimes in context. And I want to share that with y'all, to all our elders that are here, that we acknowledge that, sometimes you just got to do that. September 11th, 1973 marks 40 years since what we like to call the first 9/11. Our parents were political prisoners. Victor Toro, without Victor Toro, there is no Rebel Diaz. Without Nieves Aires, there is no Rebel Diaz.
Yes.
From La Peña del Bronx. I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional, but it's a real 40 years of struggle, 40 years of resistance, and 40 years to let them know that those seeds of rebellion have grown up, and we are still carrying that torch for a better tomorrow and for a more just world. Let's do this joint, look.
Para todos los desaparecidos, para los exiliados, para los asilados, estamos presentes.
Es el 11 de septiembre, voy al choque con los pacos. Yo cargo una escopeta que fue hecha por los cabros. Es un juego bien casero, pero no es un matagato. La calle tan sola, solo yo y un guanaco. El zapato, el zorrillo con el hip hop combativo. Los ricos a su lado porque el pueblo está conmigo. Sácate un limón pa' pelear el lagrimógeno. Sácate un sillón pa' quemarlo en la calle. Una fogata que te gane con el humo en el cielo. Por lo menos una noche resentimos como pueblo. La noche está dura, empezó el apagón. La dictadura sigue viva, solo se escondió. Y
solo le pido a Dios
que recuerde a los niños.
Y al final
es el futuro que repite la historia. Recuperen la memoria porque ahora es la hora.
Al final de esta vida todo el dolor se termina y por eso lucho. Lucho contra el sistema y nunca paré luchando.
A mi padre se lo digo,
se lo juro. Esta vida no fue fácil, sí fue duro. A su lado estaré para siempre y no los dejaré.
Peleando, luchando por la justicia, igualdad, dignidad en este mundo.
Let's go. Lejos de la patria con el compañero en cana, más bien campo en tortura, maltratado por los guardias. Madre que es sola con un hijo cabro chico, familia hecha tira, obligada a estar clandestina. Europa la recibe, mundo extraño, lengua rara. Puras caras blancas, ojos azules la mirada. Alemania, Suecia, Londres, donde más que Gringolandia. Reunía con su pozo, pero ya las cosas cambian. Caminos separados a los 24 años. Daño irreparable, casi desde que empezaron. Y después de un tiempo afuera desempacan la paleta. La que estaba por la puerta, lista para la vuelta. Perdí la esperanza de por qué, pa' qué. Los hijos ya crecieron, entre ellos hablando inglés. El Chile de ellos ya no existe más, pero la experiencia del pasado radican avanzado.
A mi padre se lo digo, se lo juro. Esta vida no fue fácil, sí fue duro. A su lado estaré para siempre y no los dejaré.
A los cabros de la pobla, a la madre que está sola, al viejo cartonero que perdió todo el dinero. Cuando llueve es difícil y los cuicos están secos. Las casas de cartón nunca fueron de ellos. Los milicos nunca hallaron donde estaban los momios. Apoyaban lo que pasaba con el gobierno, obvio. Y el mundo de los pobres no es pura miseria. Aunque no hay material, existe otra riqueza. El calor humano que se siente entre hermanos. Cuando el tiempo tan difícil se comparte con un trago. El ejemplo de prestar el azúcar al vecino. Y si hay pan duro, el pan duro compartimos. Solo respiro y las tomas se resisten. Y esto a mí me muestra que la rebeldía existe. Somos los niños del exilio, semilla de rebelión. La guerra que empezaron no se terminó. Después de 40 años de lucha, queremos que sepan que seguimos luchando. Seguimos en resistencia. Compañeros, compañeras, let's go.
Al final de esta vida todo el dolor se termina y por eso lucho contra el sistema y nunca pararé luchando.
A
mi padre se lo digo, se lo juro. Esta vida no fue fácil, sí fue duro. A su lado estaré para siempre y no lo dejaré.
A los desaparecidos. Yellow, Robert Diaz, Rock Stars G1, DJ Illinois, featuring us. Much love, y'all.
It is June 18th, 1953. Today is Ethel and Julius's 14th wedding anniversary, and it is a day of waiting. This morning, Manny Block and the new lawyers argue before the Supreme Court that Douglas's stay should be upheld. A kangaroo court, since we now know the outcome had been decided 2 days earlier. Ethel and Julius, their family and supporters are in limbo. At any moment, the Supreme Court might overturn the stay and the executions will go forward as planned. Ethel and Julius draw up their wills and write their last letter to Manny Block.
June 18, 1953. Dear Manny, I've drawn up a last will and testament so that there can be no question about the fact that I want you to handle all our affairs and be responsible for the children, as in fact you have been doing. Ethel completely concurs in this request and is in her own hand attesting to it. Our children are the apple of our eye, our pride and most precious fortune. Love them with all your heart. And always protect them in order that they grow up to be normal, healthy people. That you will do this, I'm sure, but as their proud father, I take the prerogative to ask it of you. My dearest friend and devoted brother, I love my sons profoundly.
I am not much at saying goodbyes because I believe that good accomplishments live on forever. My love of life has never been so strong because I've seen how beautiful the future can be. I feel that we, in some small measure, have contributed our share in this direction. I think our sons and millions of others will benefit by it.
Words fail me when I attempt to express the nobility and the grandeur of my life's companion. Ours is a great love, a wonderful relationship. It has made my life full and rich.
For peace, bread, and roses in simple dignity, we face the executioner with courage, confidence, and perspective, never losing faith. Never let them change the truth of our innocence.
P.S. All my personal effects are in 3 cartons and you can get them from the warden.
The Supreme Court remains silent all day, and the Rosenbergs wait. In households around the city, around the country, around the world, progressive people wait with them. Trade unionists and teachers, ministers and rabbis, dock workers, communists, and cotton spinners.
Yes, Angela, we waited all day, and many of you waited with us. Many of you understand that although the specifics change, the faces change, the language change, governments and the corporations who dominate them try to convince their citizens that dissent equals disloyalty and protest equals treason. From the Palmer raids to Sacco and Vanzetti, from Julie and me to Bradley Manning and Julian Assange. The people in power try to scare us all into believing that giving up our civil liberties will make us safe. But that's not true, is it?
Many of us in this room didn't buy it then, and we don't buy it now. We fought against it in 1927 and in 1953, and you are still fighting now. In the courts, in the media, in the schools, in the streets, in the prisons, especially in the prisons, where over 2 million human beings are locked up while corporations profit from their incarceration, where people convicted of politically motivated crimes or members of marginalized communities often receive longer sentences under more restrictive conditions.
Sometimes the forces against us can seem insurmountable, but Ethel and Julius believe the future could be beautiful and that another world is possible. The Rosenberg Fund for Children springs from and honors their vision. It helps the children of today's activists in similar ways to how Robbie and Michael were nurtured after their family was targeted, with grants for schools and camps, for music lessons and counseling, for tutoring, and to visit a parent in prison. In addition to awarding grants for these kinds of services and activities, the RFC brings groups of beneficiaries together for events called gatherings, held over 4-day periods, sometimes for families and sometimes for young adults. Gatherings offer participants opportunities to share their stories and to combat the isolation that can make activist families and young people vulnerable.
My mother has been active in environmental and anti-war causes for over 25 years. She was arrested many times for civil disobedience, trying to prevent the construction of an incinerator, at a military recruiting station protesting the first Iraq War, and against nuclear weapons in Nevada and Oak Ridge. There was ongoing surveillance and occasional searches of our home. 7 years ago, my mom was targeted as part of a wave of intimidation and arrests of environmental activists called the Green Scare. At the time I was 16, agents held me at gunpoint. My mother was sentenced to 22 years, an extra heavy penalty because of terrorism enhancement. 3 years ago, my sister and I attended the RFC's Carry It Forward gathering. It was so powerful to meet other people like us, who had stories like ours. It was so powerful to see that we were not alone. You don't get to talk about this stuff with most people.
The RFC believes that it is critical to tell our stories and listen to each other's. That is how we pass on the values we cherish to our children, our nieces and nephews and grandchildren and godchildren, our students, our young neighbors, to all of the daughters and the sons. Changing the world has taken generations, and it will take generations. Part of our work is honoring those who came before us. Please welcome activist and poet Martín Espada.
Carry it forward. That last reader was my son. And this poem is called All the People Who Are Now Red Trees. When I see the red maple, I think of a shoemaker and a fish peddler red as the leaves electrocuted by the state of Massachusetts. When I see the red maple, I think of Flamboyant's red flower, two poets like Flamboyant chained at the wrist for visions of San Juan Bay without Navy gunboats. When I see the Flamboyant, I think of my grandmother and her name, Catalan for red, a war in Spain, and nameless laborers marching with broken rifles. When I see my grandmother and her name, Catalan for red, I think of union organizers in graves without headstones feeding the roots of red trees. When I stand on a mountain, I can see the red trees of a century. I think red leaves are the hands of condemned anarchists, red flowers the eyes and mouths of poets in chains, red wreaths in the treetops to remember. I see them raising branches like broken rifles, all the people who are now red trees.
Thank you, Martin. One of our challenges as adults is to help young people understand the complexities of the past, as well as appreciate the rich tradition of working for social justice, and perhaps to contribute to that work themselves. Some children of targeted activists, like Rebel Diaz, like Robbie and Michael, embrace activism themselves. And sometimes the RFC has the privilege to make grants to benefit several generations of a family to nurture a forest of red trees, young and old.
My name is Tito Kayak, and I am a red tree. I was born in Vieques. My small island was used as a target, a bombing range, by the U.S. Navy. I'm a member of Amigos del Mar, Friends of the Sea. In Spanish, MAR stands for the Revolutionary Environmental Movement, because we are revolutionaries. In 1999, a fighter jet missed the target zone and killed a Vieques native, David Sanes. We organized a memorial service on the bombing range and decided to stay there to act as human shields. Ni una bomba más, not one more bomb. This grew into the first Vieques civil disobedience encampment and became the key to our success in getting the Navy out.
Many of you probably remember when Tito Kayak slipped out of a window inside the Statue of Liberty, climbed up the crown, and unfurled the Puerto Rican and Vieques flags with a banner that read, Paz para Vieques. Or the time he paddled his kayak up to a Navy warship, and while the television cameras rolled and the sailors tried to upset his kayak with fire hoses, painted Peace for Vieques in large red letters on the battleship, cleverly protected by the tapering shape of the hull. Or when he kayaked from Venezuela to Puerto Rico and then to Washington, D.C. to demand freedom for Puerto Rican political prisoner Oscar López Rivera. Like many activists, Tito Kayak has a family. The RFC paid for a special needs school program for his son and music lessons for his daughter. That daughter is now an organizer herself and an RFC beneficiary under the Targeted Activists Youth Program.
I am Tito Kayak's daughter. Yo soy un árbol rojo. As a full-time student at the University of Puerto Rico, I was outraged when Law Number 7 gave emergency power to the governor to address the budget deficit. The first thing he did was cut $200 million from the university and impose a new $800 fee, making education impossible for many students. I became involved in the student strike, which became a general strike. When the police identified me as a leader, they chased me, harassed me.
During the RFC board's discussion about whether to make grants for 6 University of Puerto Rico activists, Board President Rafael Rodriguez Cruz, another red tree, explained his point of view.
It is difficult for me to really give an objective opinion on this application.
Any of these stories with some modifications is the story of my life. I was active in the struggle at the University of Puerto Rico in the 1972-1974 strikes. Looking back to it, the whole process had a severe impact on my life. I was identified as a subversive, a victim of the same police. I had to drop from school to go to work in a factory. I ended up pretty much without a place to live. What I see in these stories is a targeting that originates not only in the university or the police, but in the Puerto Rican society as a whole, and in our colonial status. One of my best professors, a supporter of the strike, who I consider also a friend, was murdered by the police and the right-wing groups during the strikes. It is weird to have this memory of a compañero fighting one day next to you, and the next day he's gone forever. Bringing these applications to the board has been an opportunity for me to honor that memory.
We are all connected, targeted activists and their children, targeted activist youth, and our board and staff. The RFC forest of red trees also includes multiple generations of activist donors.
My name is Emma, and I am a red tree, from a family of red trees. Old left, new left, and even newer left. When I was 9, I read the book Fire about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire right here in New York City. My older brother was beginning to work on anti-sweatshop campaigns, and the fact that the same problems were facing us 100 years later made me furious. I was also teased for being loud and female in school, and that made me bound and determined that I was going to prove that what I was saying mattered, and that being a girl would not stop me from doing anything, particularly speaking my mind. In the background of all these experiences were the songs of various social movements we sang and listened to at home. So even the most horrific events took on the feeling of warmth and support and community associated with family. The music also made me want to be part of something that big and positive. When I was 14, I was arrested with my mom at an anti-prison industrial complex demo in DC. I recently received money as part of a settlement brought by those of us arrested that day. The settlement was, I understand, the biggest settlement ever of its kind in the US history. The arrests themselves weren't a big deal, and I wasn't particularly upset by the whole thing. But my mom, who had to watch me being taken away from her, was deeply affected. Funny how we focus on the impact of arrests on kids, but less on the impact on our parents. Anyway, naturally some of the settlement money needs to go back into the relevant activist pot, and RFC is such.
Time passes, children grow up, generations change.
I am Robbie. I am the 6-year-old boy of this story, with my brother Michael, the beneficiary of a profound political legacy. I am also the 43-year-old father who finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life and started the RFC in 1990. Now, I'm the 66-year-old grandfather who is ready to pass the leadership of this organization to my daughter, Jennifer Ethel Mirapol.
I never knew my grandparents, but from my earliest memory, their faces and their story have been part of our family. I grew up with a complicated stew of emotions, sorrow and anger, pride and obligation. I felt the impact of Ethel and Julius on my life as deeply as I've known their absence. In the midst of my sadness and anger about what was done to my grandparents, I feel a fierce pride in who they were and what they stood for. That's why 6 years ago, I joined the RFC as the granting coordinator, and it's why when my dad steps down at the end of this summer, I'll become the next executive director of the Rosenberg Fund. Luckily for all of us, there is renewed political activism around the world, acknowledging the new generation of activists. In 2000, the RFC started making grants to targeted activist youth. These grants are for young people, like Tito Kayak's daughter, who have been targeted and harmed for their own political activities rather than their parents. This program has given us an opportunity to meet some amazing young people.
I was born in Mexico and grew up in Arizona. By age 10, I was involved in street theater and theater for social change. I was outspoken and I was an organizer. I was threatened with deportation and with violence. My family experienced emotional and financial stress and I became homeless, but I kept going to school and then to college. I wasn't able to apply for financial aid or loans because of my immigration status, but I heard about the Rosenberg Fund. I received a grant as a targeted activist youth to help with my education, and I was invited to attend an RFC Carry It Forward weekend and meet other young adult beneficiaries. Now I'm in graduate school for Chicana Studies with a focus on the effect of immigration raids on children's educational, physical, and emotional well-being. And I am raising my youngest sister. I am a poet, a teacher, a community activist, and a passionate advocate for the educational rights of undocumented immigrants. I am undocumented, but I am not illegal. I am not a criminal. I have hopes and dreams, and they are much larger than the hate aimed at me. When the DREAM Act passes, remember me.
We will remember you. We will remember the generations who came before us. Generations of people around the world fighting for liberation and for human rights. Immigrants and slaves, socialists and teachers, auto workers and anarchists have carved paths of resistance to injustice. In order for our work to be successful, we must honor our history and learn from it while nurturing the generations to come. It is critical to pass on our spirit of activism. There are many ways to pass it on. As Emma told us, one way is music. Mike and Ruthie live in upstate New York with their 2 young children who join them on tour and sometimes even on stage. They carry forward and honor the folk traditions of Pete Seeger and others while creating their own updated protest music for a new generation. Please welcome Mike and Ruthie.
Thank you.
Oh, my mother, she once told me, you gotta be as bright as you can. Oh, my mother, she once told me, you gotta be as bright as you can. Oh, you gotta be as bright as you can. And my father, he once told me, you gotta be as strong as you can. Oh, my father, he once told me, you gotta be as strong as you can.
Oh, you gotta be as strong as you can.
Oh, my lover, he once told me, you gotta be as sweet as you can. Oh, my lover, he once told me, you gotta be as sweet as you can.
Oh, you gotta be as sweet as you can. My love comes to me like a sword of light on this battlefield, your flag of white.
Oh, my suitcase, it once told me, you gotta be as light as you can. Oh, my suitcase, it once told me, you gotta be as light as you can. Oh,
you gotta be as light as you can.
Oh, my baby once told me, you gotta be as soft as you can. My baby once told me, you gotta be as soft as you can. Oh, you gotta be as soft as you can. And you gotta be as light as you can. And you gotta be as sweet as you can. You gotta be as strong as you can. And you gotta be as bright as you can. Yeah, you gotta be as bright as you can. Thank you. It is a great honor to be here and to be with you tonight. I was thinking earlier how both my parents are folk musicians. I grew up in the folk world. My dad, he grew up in the Bronx. My mom grew up in Yorktown Heights, and they met in the Village back in the 60s. And to my knowledge, neither of them was ever arrested. But they did instill, they and their friends and all the folks I grew up around did instill in me a really healthy respect for anybody, all the people who just look inside and do what's right, even at a great personal sacrifice. And that's something that I hope to pass on to our kids as well. Yeah, here's a song from the 60s, right? This one is we didn't write this one.
This is a Len Chandler song, comes out of the civil rights movement. Yeah, Len Chandler. All right. It's called I'm Going to Get My Baby Out of Jail.
Said she wasn't guilty and she wouldn't pay no bail. I'm going to get my baby out of jail. Must have walked a valley on my floor. I must have walked a valley on my floor. Was waiting on her footsteps and a knocking at my door.
get my baby out of jail. Just one more thing working on my mind. There's one more thing working on my mind. High court costs and lawyer fees ain't something like a fine. Well, I'm going to get my baby out of jail. I'm gonna get my baby out of jail. I'm gonna get my baby out of jail. Said she wasn't guilty and she wouldn't pay no bail. I'm going to get my baby out of jail.
Thank you. Mike, why don't you sing that new one?
Yeah.
All right.
This is a very moving event, is it not? This whole thing? Oh my God. As Rod Stars was saying, I've been having trouble keeping it together back in the wings, but you guys make me feel very comfortable, so thanks. Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to get a round of applause for all the people who work at Town Hall, the crew, the volunteers, the RFC, for making this run so smooth. It's no small feat. It's a big show.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job, and they're doing it with style. Well, as Ruthie mentioned, we're from just outside of Woodstock, New York, up in the Hudson Valley. Yeah. And I grew up in New Hampshire, but that's where Ruthie grew up. We live in the house she grew up in, actually. And one of the big causes that we've been a part of is the anti-fracking movement. Yeah. Yeah. It's been inspiring to watch it grow and take hold, make a difference, and I've been just very proud to be a small part of it. And this is a song I wrote after I saw the movie Gasland. Yeah, my goodness. If you haven't seen it, do see it. And if you don't know about how terrifying fracking is, please get yourself informed. This song is called Drill on the Horizon. Drill on the horizon, my water tastes like hell. Gas man says it's safe to drink, but he won't drink it himself. No, 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 I can't hold the wheel. Drill on the horizon, my neighbor leased her land. Now I'm so sick and dizzy, I can hardly stand. Oh, I can't hold the wheel. Drill on the horizon, many more to come, you know. Go and tell my true love I got nowhere else to go. I can't hold the wheel. Drill on the horizon, go and get the doctor quick. Yeah, go and tell my true love this here gasland's making me sick. I can't hold the wheel. Drill on the horizon, my water tastes like hell. Gas man says it's safe to drink, but he won't drink it himself. No, 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 I can't hold the wheel. No, 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 I can't hold the wheel. Thanks so much.
All right, well, we're going to sing one more song and to send it out to the Rosenberg Fund for Children, all the people who take part in their wonderful and important work, and all the people who support it. And this is a song that you may recognize, and we learned it for the occasion, so it's a new one for me to sing. Just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Oh, I go to the movie and I go downtown. Now, someone's always telling me don't hang around. It's been a long
been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for having us.
It is June 19th, 1953. In the morning, it looks like Robbie and Michael might see their parents again. But at noon, the reconvened Supreme Court overrules Justice Douglas and vacates his stay of execution. There are worldwide protests and a 24-hour picket line around the White House. The lawyers file more petitions. President Eisenhower receives over 21,000 telegrams urging clemency. But he refuses to meet with Julius's mother or with Manny Block. Eisenhower denies clemency, and the scheduled execution is moved up from 11 p.m. to 8 p.m. so as not to desecrate the Jewish Sabbath. At Sing Sing, Ethel and Julius are permitted to spend the afternoon together, separated with the usual wire mesh. They write one final letter to their sons.
Dearest sweethearts, my most precious children, only this morning it looked like we might be together after all. Now that this cannot be, I want so much for you to know all that I have come to know. Unfortunately, I may write only a few simple words. The rest of your own lives must teach you as mine has taught me.
At first, of course, you will grieve bitterly for us, but you will not grieve alone. That is our consolation, and it must eventually be yours. Eventually, too, you must come to believe that life is worth living.
Be comforted, because even now, with the end of our life slowly approaching, we know this with a conviction that defeats the executioner.
Your lives must teach you, too, that good cannot really flourish in the midst of evil, that freedom and all the things that go to make up a truly satisfying and worthwhile life must sometimes be purchased very dearly. Be comforted then that we were serene and understood with the deepest kind of understanding that civilization had not, as yet, progressed to the point where life did not have to be lost for the sake of life.
And that we were comforted in the sure knowledge that others would carry on after us. We wish we might have had the tremendous joy and gratification of living our lives out with you. Your daddy with me in these last momentous hours sends his heart and all the love that is in it for his dearest boys. Always remember, we were innocent and could not wrong our conscience. We press you close and kiss you with all our strength. Lovingly,
Daddy,
Mommy,
Julius,
Ethel.
In Manhattan, June 19th is hot and steamy. Late in the afternoon, a crowd begins to gather on 17th Street between Broadway and Fifth Avenue.
Save the Rosenbergs!
New evidence shows perjury!
Trial!
Stop this legal murder!
We demand a new
Stop
trial!
this legal murder! New evidence shows perjury!
I work in a machine shop a few blocks south of here. I volunteer for the committee. That's the committee to secure justice in the Rosenberg case. We applied today for the permit to meet in Union Square. We thought there'd be a stay of execution.
I'm a garment worker. I came today to celebrate saving the Rosenbergs' lives. Instead, it's a death watch. My husband wanted me to stay home. It's safer, but I had to be here.
Despite the permit, the police refused to allow the people to assemble in the square and push the crowd onto 17th Street. The loudspeaker truck sets up. Workers leaving the lofts and offices and factories and shops join women and men and children walking slowly from the neighborhoods and subways and bus stops.
I'm a student in high school. I'm here with my dad. It's scary. I keep looking up at the Con Edison clock, ticking a second at a time toward 8 o'clock.
It looks like there are 10,000 people on this block. Weeping people, angry people. In all my years of teaching high school history, you think I'd be used to the government's shameful shenanigans. Still, I didn't think that the government would kill white people like this, like lynching.
We might not know too much about the atom bomb. We know plenty about stool pigeons and union busting, scare tactics to keep us from organizing, to keep us quiet.
My dad says when he was my age, he marched in a rally just like this one after Sacco and Vanzetti were murdered. He said it changed his entire life. It scared him, sure, but it just made him want to fight harder so that people wouldn't be killed for their beliefs. I think today might change my life, too.
The speakers at the rally struggled with their emotions, trying to find a voice for the unspeakable.
Look at the time! Julius and Ethel's minutes are rushing away, and with it, America's honor.
Ethel and Julius gave America a precious gift by being strong and fighting, not crawling.
My dad says the electric chair can't kill the doubts in the Rosenberg case.
It's getting late. The sky is turning pink. Finally, the speaker announces that it is happening right now. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg are now being executed at Sing Sing. The voice jolts the crowd like lightning.
All of us standing in the crowded streets recognize the very moment the lights dim for the second time at Sing Sing. At that moment, the scarlet sun dips below the Palisades across the Hudson, and the crowd begins to sing.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Oh, let us all from bondage flee, let my people go. And let us all at last be free, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go.
The police are on their horses, pushing us towards Fifth Avenue. Some people are walking together towards Knickerbocker Village, where the Rosenberg family used to live. I'm headed to my sister's apartment to talk to her kids about what happened.
My mother stayed at home with my younger brother and sister today. She couldn't bear to bring them. They're the same ages as Michael and Robbie Rosenberg.
Believe me, none of us will ever forget that we were on 7th Street on June 19th,
1953.
Around the country, in Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles, around the world, in London and Paris and Buenos Aires and New Zealand and Iceland, people gathered together on June 19th so that they did not have to be alone when the clock ticked and the minutes died. 6 decades later, people are still coming together to fight for change. A lot has happened in the 60 years since the Rosenbergs were killed. We've known SNCC and CORE, SDS and AIM, Black Panthers and Gray Panthers, Young Lords and Raging Grannies, Rosa Parks and Howard Zinn, Rainbows and Greens, Stonewall and My Lai, Tiananmen Square and Tahrir Square, Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Sandy, Stop the Pipeline, Ban the Fracking, Idle No More, and Stop, Stop, and Frisk. In 2013, we are still together, still learning, and still fighting.
Let my people go.
Those of you who have read my dad's book, An Execution in the Family, know that he talks about the RFC as his constructive revenge, his way of transforming the negative of his parents' execution into something positive for the future. For me, my work at the RFC is a way of saying thank you to the community of people who fought for my grandparents and, so importantly in my life, protected and nurtured my dad and uncle. My sister Rachel and I, along with our cousins Ivy and Greg, and the next generation, Julian and Dylan, Josie and Abel, owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the hundreds of people, many of whom we'll never meet, who helped our fathers grow up sane and loving and progressive. It's totally fitting that we're here together on the anniversary of my grandparents' execution and on Father's Day, because all of them, the grandparents I never knew, the dad and uncle I love, are part of the reason I'm thrilled to join the family business. I am grateful to be a part of this amazing legacy and look forward to continuing to pass it on to a new generation of RFC supporters, targeted activists, and their children, the RFC family.
I'm grateful too for Jen's commitment and leadership and for all of you. The idea for the RFC mission jolted me out of a deep sleep almost 25 years ago, but it would never have become a reality without the involvement of thousands of wonderful people like you folks here tonight. Your support has helped me transform the destruction that was visited upon my family into an organization that helps children in similar circumstances today. They say revenge is sweet, but the RFC is my constructive revenge, and it is even sweeter. Thank you. When my parents died 60 years ago, I was too young to give a eulogy for them. I was 6. I didn't know my parents well, not in the ways 2 lives can be measured and described to others. I have spent these 6 decades learning who my parents were outside of our family and trying to understand their work and their choices.
Julius did help the USSR in the 1940s, but neither Julius nor Ethel was guilty of the crime for which they faced the executioner. Government documents reveal that Ethel was not a spy, and Julius was ignorant of the atomic bomb project. There was no way they could receive a fair trial. They were innocent of stealing the secret of the atom bomb, and they were fighting for their lives.
Michael and I understand the terrible toll parents' activism can take on the family. But our best chance of building a more humane and just society rests on the activism of ordinary citizens, people with families, and such activism can't always be risk-free. I am profoundly proud of my parents.
Julie and I were not innocent victims of American fascism. We were activists, taking risks in the service of our strong political beliefs. Risks we felt were necessary to try to make the world more free and more just.
When repression crashed down upon us, the government presented us with a choice that so many activists have been given over the decades, that so many faced during the McCarthy period and face today: name names or suffer the consequences. Ethel and I decided to resist rather than capitulate. We resisted not only for ourselves, but also for our community, for our children.
If my parents had taken the course of David and Ruth Gringlass and lied about their friends, in the short run, it might have been easier for Michael and me. However, in the long run, today I am so grateful that I am the child of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg with all the consequences of that heritage. I believe that it is a much better legacy than David and Ruth Gringlass left their children.
Despite the awful consequences of their choices, Ethel and Julius acted with integrity, courage, and in accordance with their beliefs. Through their choices, their resistance, my grandparents passed their passion for social justice onto their sons, to our extended families, to all of us. Like Ethel and Julius, current activists are working not only for today, but also for future generations.
With the support of our beloved community, we mourn the loss of Ethel and Julius 60 years ago. We reflect on our nation's legacy of racism and slavery, of class warfare and corporate greed. We rededicate ourselves to resist our government's war-making abroad and repression at home. We will not name names. We will not keep quiet. Like Ethel and Julius, like today's young activists, we believe a better world is possible. We will continue to honor our heritage, the forest of red trees, and to nurture future generations who will carry it forward and pass it on.
Don't tell me heaven is under the earth. I know you don't know what life is really worth. You say all that glitters not gold, but half that story has never been told. Now you So stand up for your right. Come on,
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Nosotros somos periodistas de la esquina, una historia exclusiva de mi perspectiva. La violencia en la calle no es culpa del hip hop, porque antes del hip hop la violencia existió. El inicio del país más rico del mundo está basado en la violencia como forma de abuso. Los esclavos fueron robados, trasladados para acá, luego pasados y vendidos para trabajar. It goes.
Get up, stand up.
Come on.
Stand up for your right.
Hey, hey.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
you know, some people think great God will come from the sky and take away everything and make everybody feel high. But if you know what life is worth, you will look for yours on earth, and now you'll see the light. We got to stand up for our right. Everybody
Come
now
on.
get up.
Stand up. Hey, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Oh, don't give up the fight. Yeah, get up, stand up. Let the people say, stand up for your right. Let the people say, get up, stand up. Hey, don't give up the fight.
See, I'm just trying to even the scales, level the playing field, so my kids and your kids can play together well. The other option, well, it really don't be real. If we stay on this path, we're gonna kill ourselves, cause we farming for profit. Surplus stock is saved for fuel while there's still food shortage. Hungry and homeless, while some at home with feet on the ottoman, food in the oven. It goes, come on, come on. Say it with us, y'all.
Get up, stand up. Oh, don't give up the fight. Yeah, get up, stand up. Hey, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Hey, now when I say get up, y'all say stand up. Get up, get up. When I say get up, y'all say stand up, get up, get up, stand up. When I say get up, y'all say stand up, get up, get up. When I say get up, y'all say stand up, get up, get up, get up, stand up.
Come on.
Hey, stand up for your right. Let the people say get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get up, stand Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Hey, hey, hey. Clap your hands, y'all. Clap your hands. Clap your hands, y'all. Clap your hands.
You know we'll never give up the fight.
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 Get up, stand up.
Get up, stand up.
Stand up for your right.
Stand up for your right.
Get up, stand up.
Get up, stand up.
Don't give up the fight.
Don't give up the fight.
Woo! Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody.